Okay. Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight on our question and answer with our registered dietitians. We're excited to talk tonight about plant-based athletes. I know it's a question that a lot of people have, and so I'm glad that we have this opportunity to have this discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and let Nicole introduce herself, tell us about her and her background, and then we'll let Kylee go, and then we'll get started right into the questions.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Nicole Kerneen. I am a registered dietitian, certified dietitian, and certified specialist in sports dietetics. I do own Way of Life Nutrition and Fitness, and I have been in operation for about 23 years, and I have been in practice for over 24. Yeah, that was thumbnail. That was real quick. I also have there's more, I think. I do have a podcast with my co-host, Annie Weiss, Between Two Pastries. And we also have a book together called Fueling on Purpose. I just have to have it right here, go figure, which is an interactive workbook to help shift perspectives around nutrition, movement, and health.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. and Kylee.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kylee Van Horn. I am located near Aspen, Colorado, and I am the owner of Fly Nutrition. We work with all different types of endurance athletes, from skiers to runners and cyclists. I write for Women's Running and Outside Magazine. And then other things, we're starting to do more master classes and group programs with Fly Nutrition. So if one-on-one nutrition coaching isn't something you're looking for and you just want to learn more about different topics, we are going to be doing more of that in the future. And actually, coincidentally, we're doing a plant-based athlete 3-part masterclass series in November. My co-dietitian Emily is vegan, so she is going to be leading that masterclass series. So if you want to learn more, we'll be doing that.
Yes, thank you. If you do want to learn more, you can reach out to me and I can give you the link. So, all right. Would Nicole or Kylee or both of you like to just kind of lead us in a little bit with what is plant-based athletes? You know, give us a little bit of background on that, and then we can move into the questions.
Sure. Yeah. I guess how I define plant-based athletes is really just an athlete who primarily focuses on consuming plant proteins, plants in all, areas as their main foundation of their diet. I don't see plant-based as being not animal protein inclusive, because then I feel like now we're just getting into being vegetarian, vegan, pescatarian, all those different versions. So that's truly how I define being plant-based.
All right, thank you. Kylee, would you like to share any more or what you think?
I mean, I think it's pretty similar. I think we can get, divide it into like plant forward or vegetarian or vegan. And those are all maybe forms of a plant-based diet. But I think Nicole's definition is kind of how I would go about defining it.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to get right into the questions. The two of you can take turns, add to each other's, however works best for us. So the first question, several people, and I do appreciate everybody putting in some questions for us. It makes the night go a lot better when we have some great questions to ask. But we did have a really popular question, and it was about protein. So many people were wondering, like, how do I get enough protein? Specifically for somebody over 50, how do I know I'm getting enough protein as an endurance athlete? Is there a certain number of grams of protein I should take daily? So I'm going to let you guys kind of take the protein question and run with it.
All right.
You can start, Nicole, if you want.
Okay. No, really. No, you. No. It's the $1 million question, right? How can I get more protein? So I think the thing is that, again, a lot of this is also super individualized, because where are your sources coming from? How much are you currently getting in? Are you including some type of protein, plant-based protein, source of protein at every meal and snack? What does that look like? How can you get more? Well, again, it's still kind of figuring out where we're starting from, but there's always like plant-based shakes you can kind of, insert, during the course of the day. There's several brands that I particularly like. I feel like Owen is probably one of my favorites. Aloha is another option. It used to be a bigger fan of Orgain, and then they switched over, and now it's very confusing because they have 2 or 3 different formulas for their same plant-based protein shake. And it's disappointing because in a couple of them, the ingredients are less than par. And in one of them, the ingredients are actually quite similar to Owen. So that was probably really confusing, but I think I'm just trying to kind of shed light that it's important that you kind of like make sure you're like reading your label around that. But I'd like to put them in the category, but you've got to kind of look at what their offerings really are there. I think, excuse me for stuttering. Loretta, were you adding in the how much should I rely on condensed forms at the same time? Sorry, I wasn't sure.
Yes, I did forget that one. We can throw that one in. How much should I rely on condensed proteins like tofu, tempeh, seitan for the protein?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And those are your most condensed forms and complete amino acid forms of protein in general. And that's what's really important when we're looking at being plant-based anyway. It's really not a matter of like, and I don't want to insert, foot here, but it's hear me when I say that it's not necessarily the protein that's as important as the amino acid that's important. So we do need the protein, but it's important that we do have the amino acid to it. So, getting in a couple servings of a soy-based protein source in a day is going to be okay. When I like to help my clients typically add in amino acids through like liquid aminos of some sort, coconut aminos, Bragg's amino acids, and those kind of add some flavor to some items too. So again, it's a question that's hard to answer pretty much because I'm not sure exactly what this individual or all of the individuals are doing per meal. So again, and it's also a personal preference too. If you like, let me just see here. Yeah, if you like the beans and the grains more, then that's what you focus on. But it's a matter of trying to get in then those other amino acids to supplement that as well. So it's kind of figuring out, what it is that you like and trying to work with that.
Okay, thank you, Nicole.
Yeah.
Kylee, anything to add to that?
So typically when I'm working with an athlete on this, I want people to understand that just because you're a plant-based athlete doesn't mean that your protein needs are lower than someone else that eats meat, etc. In fact, they might be a little bit higher depending on, there's some debate as to whether there's a little bit lower digestibility score in the intestines on plant-based proteins. So making sure that you're still getting in the 1.6 to 2 grams per kilogram body weight of protein per day, depending on your training, is a good starting place. And kind of like Nicole was saying, getting a sense of like, where am I at with that? And then from there, you can kind of figure out what you want to do to try and increase your overall protein intake. The hard part with plant-based is that a lot of the protein sources are also going to contain maybe some fiber. Yes. Overall, yeah. So yeah. Overall, like volume of food when you're on a plant-based diet, that overall volume can be overwhelming if you don't have knowledge around what your actual needs are. So for instance, like a half a cup of beans, lentils, or chickpeas can have about 8 to 9 grams of protein. And if you need to have 30 grams at a meal, you're looking at over 2 cups of beans, lentils, or chickpeas if that's your main protein source at the meal. Now, obviously, like utilization of different protein sources could be helpful there, And that's where like the condensed sources of protein, like your soy and your soy products, your vital wheat gluten, those sorts of things can be helpful so that you're able to increase your protein with maybe not having quite as much volume. And I don't really, I guess, on the plant-based side of things, like familiarizing yourself with amounts of protein in those plant-based foods, and then figuring out where am I at, then how do I increase with these food options that I have. It's very similar to if you're eating animal products, but you're just more limited on your options for where you're getting your protein from, and then you're limited on how much can I actually consume. So you got to figure out some strategies for that. With protein powders, I usually recommend, or like meal replacement, like those shakes and stuff. I typically only recommend that athletes do that like once a day. I don't really like athletes to rely on, plant-based protein powder as their main source of intake. So trying to figure out, can I drink soy milk? Can I drink there's an almond cashew milk by Silk brand that has 10 grams of protein in it, looking for more creative ways to kind of get in your protein from other like food sources besides relying on that protein powder. Anyways, that was kind of long-winded, but I feel like this was a lot of questions in one. So
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Yes, thank you. I think we got a lot of information on protein, so thank you for filling us in, guys. So the next question is, I'm plant-based. How should I best fuel for recovery?
I feel like that's actually really simple. I think that's one of the best reasons to actually be more plant-based or vegetarian is because it's actually super simple to fuel in general, but also for recovery. So again, we don't require a whole lot of protein at that initial recovery. We really do require way more carbohydrate at that point. So it is pretty easy. So again, it depends on like recovery that you're thinking of. Are you thinking of immediate recovery and then the recovery that's needed, 2 hours after that? I'm trying to think of like the different events that we would be needing several types of recovery in one day. So how can you best recover is really, what do you like? Recovery, initial recovery could be something as simple as, a cup and a half of tart cherry juice and some protein powder in it. That can be your initial recovery. An actual recovery meal, can consist of, again, everybody's going to need different amounts of carbohydrate and protein, based on, your muscle and all kinds of other things too. But, it could be easily, a cup and a half of quinoa, and you can get, fruit in with that. And, you could add some tofu if you wanted, but it would probably be okay if you didn't, and you had beans at that time. And then you used some of like maybe the liquid aminos too, and had some veggies, so, I feel like it's just so easy to actually recover when you are consuming more plant-based.
Right, thank you. Kylee, anything to add to that?
I think, yeah, so exactly what this person is referencing, it's hard to tell. So are we talking post-workout, like immediately after, or overall recovery? Because with the plant-based diet, we know that plant-based athletes tend to underconsume or underfuel more often than those that do eat animal products because of the volume of food that they need to eat. So I would say energy intake is like key or king when we're looking at trying to recover overall. So volume of food, making sure you're getting that in. And then because plant-based athletes are eating high volume of plant foods, it's going to be very antioxidant rich diet. So that's already helpful there. Now, I'm also interpreting this as post-exercise, like right after, what could we do? And I would say something that's lacking in a plant-based diet is going to be high, kind of like Nicole said, high BCAA or branched chain amino acid intake. And so if we want to focus on getting in enough protein, which would be 20 grams post-exercise to stimulate muscle protein synthesis rates, and then high BCAA sources, we really really want to focus on one particular BCA, are leucine, high leucine sources. And those are in plant-based sources are going to be in things like hemp seeds, nuts, maybe some soy products, but you've got to make sure that you're getting in, number one, enough. And then I would say then focusing on those particular, that higher leucine rich food that's plant-based.
Thank you. All right, our next question is, can plant-based sustain your ultra distances, and how and what are the benefits?
Yes, I mean, most definitely. And I think benefits are kind of just what we were talking about in general. I mean, it's pretty easy to get in what you need, especially for fuel. And quite honestly, most fuel is plant-based because it's carbohydrate. So it's pretty easy to get in what you need, during an event. So that's also what I would see as a benefit. That's my short answer.
Thank you. Kylee, anything to add?
I mean, if we're talking about daily, meeting your needs as an ultra athlete on the daily, it goes back to the calorie thing that I just mentioned, because we know that ultra endurance athletes have a lot higher calorie needs than the general population because of the training volume that they're doing. So, that's the biggest thing. Like, a lot of plant-based foods are high in fiber and a little bit lower in energy. So we got to make sure that we're, eating our fat sources as well to get energy, like get our energy density in, making sure that we're meeting, again, protein needs, because it is very carb heavy. So that's the sort of thing I would say, like, it can be done, but I find that if an athlete isn't willing to put in the work to kind of get in that volume, or kind of be intentional, a little bit more intentional with a plant-based diet, it can really not turn out well in regards to like underfueling and micronutrient deficiencies.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to kind of tag off of you mentioned about healthy fats. Our next question is, what is your opinion on nuts and healthy fats? Do you want to take that, Kylee, since you're right here?
I honestly don't have any problem with healthy fats, nuts and seeds. I know there's a lot of debate maybe in certain sectors of the plant-based world on nut or on fat intake and whether it's good for us or not. If we look at what fats do, they're important for hormonal production, as well as cellular membrane health, brain health, fat soluble vitamin absorption. So if we are looking at the importance of them, it's hard for me to believe that low fat would have any benefit to someone that's trying to exercise a lot and maintain healthy hormone levels. I've seen a lot of athletes come in, specifically low testosterone, with males that are eating not enough fats overall. It can also affect female hormones too, but I've seen it in the male population. And so I think looking at, that omega-6 to omega-3 consumption, fatty acid wise, might be something to focus on, because typically in plant-based athletes, you're not getting as many omega-3 fatty acids in the diet. And there can be some added benefits in regards to inflammation, balancing, et cetera, in the body if we're getting in omega-3 fatty acids. So in that case, there are foods that contain some omega-3s that are plant-based, but they are not necessarily the EPA, DHA omega-3s that we need for inflammation balancing. And sorry to go into detail here, but the conversion rate of that plant-based ALA to EPA and DHA is very low in the human body. So if we want to get omega-3s in the DHA EPA form that we need for inflammation balancing, we might have to take a algal omega supplement. So that's my long-winded omega-3 discussion there. But sometimes I do suggest that for the plant-based athlete that's not maybe meeting their omega-3 needs. Again, sorry for the long-windedness.
No, it's all good.
In little words.
Nicole, anything you want to chime in there?
That most athletes, most people in this country for sure do not get enough omega-3s in general, which is partially why we have such a high inflammatory rate in this country. So, and when we do consume primarily plants in general, we are getting an exceptionally high amount of omega-6. So we will automatically have that imbalance. So as, Kylee was saying, I always recommend my vegan clients in particular that, we are on a vegan form of an omega-3 supplement and making sure that that's happening at a pretty high volume every single day. Again, if you're plant-based, that's fine. It doesn't mean you can't eat fish. So if you can and choose to eat fish, then please do so, because it's going to be easier for you and is absorbed so much better anyway. And you can get, and what I mean is actually you can get a higher volume at one time as well. So that really is a big concern in general. So, some people will say, well, there's omega-3s and walnuts and flaxseed and things like that. And to Kylie's point, the ALA conversion is so small, you would have to eat bags of walnuts in order to remotely, and that's just impossible and silly at the same time. And you're most certainly not going to be doing that while you're on a run either. I also just kind of wanted to go back to the previous question that we didn't address the fueling during actual training or an event, to what Kylee was also trying to say too about most plant-based things being high fiber. Goos are not high fiber, goldfish are not high fiber, and those are also plant-based. They're just carbohydrate essentially. So, it just depends on what those fuel sources are, but just making sure that you're choosing things that are not high fiber. Fiber and anything that we perceive as, I hate using the term healthy, is probably not the best to consume during a run anyway, only because of the fact that there's going to be GI disruption. It's not a time, because that's not fuel or immediate fuel. When we're training, when we're running, we're literally a machine that just needs fuel that can come in and quickly be used, come in, quickly be used. Your body does not have time or the blood source to go and start going, oh, shoot, we've got to, break this down and put it in all the files. No, it doesn't have time to do that, which is where then you can get the GI distress, or, people experience all kinds of different things for that. So I just wanted to make sure that we were being really clear about, like I said, most of the fuel that you will have on a run anyway is plant-based, simply because it's just carbohydrate. So, you're not going to be consuming broccoli on a run, because it's not a source of fuel at all. It's not even fuel. It's simply protein and fiber and nutrients. So that's not going to be fueling you, right? But some type of, rice ball that has honey in it and compacted with, say, raisins. Yeah, that can be great fuel, so it's that type of thing too. So just wanted to kind of go back and hit on that. And I'm also very curious, clearly we're not going to discuss this now because we have 4 minutes left of this, but why there would even remotely be debate about fat I have not even heard that, but it's disturbing to me. Okay, go ahead.
All right, maybe that's for another day.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
There are certain camps of plant-based out there that are low oil, low fat as well. So, and I'm familiar with those certain camps that I won't mention right now, but that is a thing.
Yeah.
So
it sounds more like disordered eating than it sounds like actual real nutrition to me. So
yeah,
I don't know.
We're not going to get into that though, because both of us don't promote it anyways.
Yeah, exactly right.
So just know there's some debate. So I'm just going to throw out one thing. I'm wondering if maybe one of the questions is, do you have a favorite recipe to share? Maybe Kylee and Nicole can send me each a favorite recipe, and I can post that later if that would be okay.
Yeah, that's
for
fine.
a trail snack. I'm sorry, I should have said that.
I was gonna say I've got
snack.
some vegan blueberry muffins or banana bread that's good. I mean, you could technically
Okay.
use that on the trail,
Okay.
but it's
Yeah.
not
So
maybe.
yeah, if you each want to just send me a recipe, I'll post it later. And if you guys look on the Trail Run Coach page, they will be there. And if you guys have recipes out there that you would like to post, you can go ahead and share them in the comments once I get that posted as well. Another question is, what about the use of gels during workouts if someone is following a whole foods plant-based diet?
That there's no problem with it.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
whenever I read that, that's I think what the person is maybe implying is that there's something wrong with gels or chews or sports nutrition products. So I don't have any problems myself with promoting gels, chews, and sports nutrition products because that's what they're formulated for. There's a lot of people that are like, but I want to consume real foods, and I'm like, well, what is a real food? Like,
Yeah.
so I would say, like, if you're looking to utilize food during, like, whole foods during your training, I would caution you to maybe not be strictly doing whole foods during your training sessions. In particular, if you're training for a half marathon, a marathon, a 50K, like, gels and really quick sources of carbohydrate is where it's at. Like, that's all that I'll say on that.
Hands down.
Awesome. Thank you. So we just have a minute, and this is kind of a big, broad, wide question, but maybe you could each give one suggestion. It's just a statement, just where to begin. Is there something, one little bit of advice you could give to, where you want to go if you're starting this?
Oh boy.
It's a big one.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is I'm just a fan of actually working with someone who just knows what they're doing, because it also depends on, again, what is plant-based going to mean to you? What do you want it to mean to you? Do you want to include some animal sources? What is that going to look like? What do you want? And I think if you just work with somebody, you'll get that real education that you would want that's specific to what it is you're asking for. So that's just sort of my fan, because I just feel like there's so many resources out there that are not good, that are free and available. And it's hard for me to like point somebody into, a particular direction around that. So
Yep. Fair answer. Thank you, Nicole. How about you, Kylee? Anything you want to add on to that?
I think my piece of advice would be to either start small or get help first, because if you do it the wrong way, you can end up in trouble. Especially a lot of people in this trail running community are doing longer events, and it can really come back and bite you later, I guess I will say, if you're not doing it correctly. The starting small piece would be, maybe you want to transition from eating animal products every day, and maybe then you have like meatless Mondays or something, and you start like 1 or 2 times a week of doing more plant-based, and then that gives you a feel of like, what will this look like for me before I go all in. And it's still having an impact potentially for you, like just making a small switch. And maybe you don't, it's like Nicole said, maybe you don't need to fully have every day be all plant products.
Okay, thank you. There's a question in the chat. I wonder if one of you would want to answer. What omega-3 supplement is recommended? Is there a quick answer to that, or no?
Well, there's a few vegan versions on the market that are pretty decent. I will say though, the one that's for sure like NSF certified and completely high quality on that level would be from Nordic Naturals. That particular brand is just a really high standard brand. So you're definitely going to get what you need from that. And that's pretty readily available too.
All right, thank you. Kylee, anything to add to that?
Nope, that's the one that I recommend.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for joining and all of the questions that you added in. And I also just want to add that we do have nutrition coaching, nutrition consultation with Nicole and with Kylee. So if you are wanting to start this plant-based journey, or maybe you're on this journey and you need some support, you can reach out and we can get some programs started for you if that's something you're interested in. So again, thank you so much and have a great rest of your night. Bye, everyone.
Bye.